Welcome to the Healthcare IT Today CIO podcast. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. I'm excited to bring you the most practical healthcare CIO insights and perspectives. We know your job is challenging and we want to help you be more successful. And our guest today is Madhu Narasimhan. She's CIO at DaVita. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to learn from you. It seems like you're doing a lot of really interesting things. But before we dive in there, tell us a little bit about yourself and DaVita.
Sure, Madhu Narasimhan. I've been here for 17 months, having a fun time at DaVita, trying to, advance healthcare, which is usually behind in the technology space. So really excited to advance healthcare and technology together.
And for those that don't know DaVita, tell us a little bit about DaVita.
Sure, we are a kidney care company, so we provide care delivery to over 250,000 patients who need kidney care. We take the continuum from the onset of kidney care through taking care of them when they need dialysis all the way to transplant, so the entire forum. And we have the ability to look at all kinds of information and data about our patients, from cardiovascular disease through kidney dialysis, all the way through social psychological factors. So we use all of that information to care for our patients. So that's who
Yeah.
we are.
That's awesome. I was going to say maybe it's good if people don't know who DaVita is because they haven't needed your services. But if you need them, you're really happy to know DaVita. So that's great.
Yeah, and our goal is to keep kidney function as long as possible. So the earlier we find out, the earlier we can care for you. So that way you're not needing all of our services, just the part that keeps you healthy.
Yeah, that's great. So talk to me about how being a CIO is different in healthcare, where the stakes are different than other industries, and what's really required from a CIO to be successful in this, high stakes environment, right, where patients' lives or patients' well-being is literally on the line.
So I think you said it right, John. Healthcare is different from retail or financial services. You can't go back and return something, and you can't like reverse a transaction 5 days later. So in healthcare, both speed and accuracy are both critical. So how do we make sure that we are creating systems and solutions with interoperability that allows for the right data to be available in the right way at the right time for our physicians, for our patients? How do we make sure that the experience that the patients go through and our physicians go through and our partners go through allow for that? The combination of clinical excellence and operational sustainability that is completely supported by technology. It's a different mind space to be in. So I think for me, healthcare, if you're using technology in healthcare and it is successful, then you've passed the ultimate test, because we don't mess around in stuff that doesn't work. We have to do things that work. We have to care for the experience in a completely differentiated way than practically any other industry. And then so the CIO's job really looks at the intersection of where technology can actually solve human problems, make the experience better, and use data to do that. That's where I think the CIO's job in healthcare is fundamentally different from other industries.
I've never heard it stated so simply that like you can't just do a refund in healthcare, right? Like, once something happens, it often is, that's the result, good or bad. That's so fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
Seems like everywhere we turn, in life, let alone healthcare and technology, we're talking about AI. What are some of the ways that you're leveraging AI? Maybe start from an operational perspective.
Yeah. AI is a thing, right? It's frothy. It's everywhere. It's going to solve world hunger. I don't know about that, but I think you've heard from us. We focus on technology that works for our patients, our caregivers, and solves problems. So AI is another tool set, and we bring in AI where it makes sense for us to solve problems rather than use it as a shiny object we chase after. So operationally, we're bringing in AI in the usual back office functions, contact center, where we're looking at administrative pieces, contracting, things that take a lot of repetitive actions in the administrative space to remove that administrative overhead. So we're doing that. And as we're doing that, we look at it in three different ways. The first is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And where, if we need to, does AI fit into it? The second piece of it is how do we change the way we do the work rather than just implement AI on top of bad workflows. How do we change the way we do the work? And then we're very, very diligent about making sure that AI is supporting our activities in a way that makes sense for our employees, who we call teammates, rather than trying to replace what they do, because in many cases we can't. Some of that is cognitive that they need to do, yeah, but we take out the administrative burden. So that's how we're looking at AI operationally, and we're going after those areas where we know there's a lot of overhead in terms of administration. Yeah.
Yeah, the administrative burden in healthcare has just grown immensely. It's
Absolutely.
fascinating to look at that history. But how about from a clinical perspective? How are you using AI? It's interesting to hear how you do it operationally. Some of those principles probably apply clinically, but how about when it comes to the clinical impact? How are you looking at AI clinically?
Yeah. So with clinical, we the bar is even higher. We have greater care. So few things we're doing. First of all, we want to make sure that there's confidence in the AI solution. So we have a ground truth library that we are creating within DaVita using our medical informatics team, so that we know that the AI that we're using actually matches what our clinicians want. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is where we're using AI in clinical is really drive better patient outcomes, right? So our patients who are on dialysis, who have end-stage kidney disease, dialysis is not a fun thing, right? You have to go 3 times a week, you have to sit for 4 hours. It's a lot of time. So we sometimes our patients will choose to do it at home. And when you're doing it at home, just like when you're exercising, you may not want to have the same level of discipline. But what we do is we look at the data, we figure out where our patients may be at risk of dropping off of that. We preemptively catch them. So we use our clinical models to care for patients so that we know things about what is happening with them before they do it. So that's how we're using clinical data. And in those cases, the bar is higher, the data has to be reviewed, and we always have a clinician in the loop for anything clinical. There's always a clinician in the loop.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about that in the framework that you set, which is this isn't, financial or retail, right? Where you can kind of take risks and see what happens, right? I mean, what you described there is what I see in so many organizations, which is there's potential here, but we have to make sure it's safe and that actually improves the clinical quality. Is that kind of the vetting process you go through as you look at AI applications?
Yeah. I think on the AI applications, we look at both how do we, so on the operational side, our focus is making sure we take out administrative burden, the repetitive processes, those kinds of things. On the clinical side, the burden is really making sure that clinically our physicians and clinicians agree with the outcomes, and it actually serves a clinical purpose that improves the lives of our patients. So with clinical, our focus is really making sure we're moving the needle on the clinical excellence, because we've shown reduced mortality, we've shown better, like we've shown clinical improvements, and that is definitely something we go after in our clinical usages.
Yeah. When I heard you describe kind of a dialysis patient, and I think it's true with most patients with some sort of kidney disease, they have a lot of medical complexities, and they're navigating a fragmented system. I heard someone say that healthcare is the most fragmented organization. One of the interrupt providers said they had 500 different sources for one patient. It was just like astounding, right? What can be done to move from this fragmentation to whole person care? What are you doing to kind of address this? Since I think all of your patients are probably in that situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're right. Our patients on average have like 4 different providers, they have 16 different medications, and they're spending a tremendous amount of time on caring for themselves. And that organization and that coordination puts a tremendous amount of burden on the patient. And when you think about it, if you're asked to do 3 things in order, you can go awry. When you have a patient and you have so much cognitive overload in terms of caring for yourself, I think the onus is on us to use that data. So first of all, I'll start with the data. We have a tremendous amount of data. Is to use that data to simplify that experience. So we're catching things for the patient and having them go through the care needs for their patient journey in the most easy way possible. So we see our patients, as multiple times a week. we can remind them. We can let them know, here's where you think you may have stopped. This is what we're seeing. How can we check on your medication? There are all these touch points of interaction. But John, this is the important part. Technology can remind, it cannot bring the empathy. For that, we depend on our teammates. That human touch with our patient is what makes a difference. So technology can only be as good as the people who are, served by it. And for me, that's the most important thing. Like, how do we make sure we are serving the technology in a way that drives maximum value, and there is no replacement for that empathy?
Mm.
It really isn't.
Yeah, I have a friend who did some work actually, in your space as well. And she described it as, hey, the reminder of something is great if the reason you're not doing it is because you forgot. But if it's in the other 85% of reasons that you're not doing it because you can't afford it, you don't have transportation, you don't, whatever, you don't trust it, you're not sure about it, like all these other reasons, then that reminder doesn't work. And that's tough for technology to navigate, but to your point, a human can, right, in a different way. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that human focused. That's interesting.
That empathetic care, technology does not provide. It enables by removing all the other impediments and barriers that get in the way of having that mindset totally focused on empathy. Because every
Yeah.
irritation takes away your ability to do that. So that's, I think, the part where tech helps.
Yeah, well, and you're right. And I would say, I heard a doctor say that the EHR was done to us and AI now is being done for us, which I thought was a nice way to describe kind of what you just said, which is the technology should help us get rid of the mundane so we can focus on the humanity and the empathy. And hopefully that's what AI is doing. It sounds like that's where you're working from.
That is exactly where we're going. And it's AI is working for our teammates, with our teammates, to make what they want to do easy. That's the goal. It's not to add any. And you're right. I think the EHR was good for its time, but that's 25 years ago. We're about the future.
Well, and we had to start digitizing somewhere. So no knock on the other people that implemented
Absolutely.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting.
the PC was good as well, right? And then we moved to mobile. So it's like we have to keep moving with the availability of tech.
Yeah, the fax machine was better than snail mail, right?
Well,
It's interesting how it continues to evolve. You mentioned the data sets that you have. I actually think kidney care has one of the richest health data sets. To your point, they're there with you, multiple times a week often. And so you have all this data about a patient. I'd love to hear, like, how are you leveraging that data set and putting it to work to, more effectively help patients?
yeah, absolutely. So you're right. We meet with our patients regularly. So we have data on them both from the physiological perspective as well as the social perspective and the medical and clinical perspective. And what we're doing with our data is, first of all, we're curating it and then figuring out where we can use that to drive different outcomes for our patients. So whether it's intervention in terms of making sure they are taking care, intervention in terms of making sure they have the efficacy of medications, or intervention in terms of either social, psychological, they need transportation, they need access to better diet. We are able to engage with them in multiple different ways. And then you get to the comorbidities. Most of our patients also have cardiac conditions. So we are able to, like, we just announced an agreement with Linea, which is another organization, a company we're working with, to bring that kind of care to our patients as well. So how can we look at the longitudinal care for our patients as full human beings as opposed to just for their one condition? So that's something we are exploring and doing as well. And what we're super proud of is actually the work we do in transplant to make sure that we're caring for the full journey of the patient and making sure, one of the things we did was we brought in this company called MedSleuth, because one of the biggest issues, John, on the transplant list is the fact that people fall off the list. You have to keep on requalifying and getting on the list. So we were able to bring that process in and really care for our patients that way. So this is kind of how we use the data in our systems. We make it a platform for the patient so that we're able to care for them for all of their needs, whether it's the care need for the kidney to proactively engage and keep kidney function, whether it's the dialysis for end state, whether it's comorbid conditions, for the transplant. So regardless of what it is, we hold the platform, if you will, in service of our patients, the platform of data.
Wow.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating to think about the expansion and the opportunity that you have because you have such a deep relationship with the patient. And that's not true for a lot of organizations, right? They see them for the 15 minutes and they don't see them for a month or 3 months, or who knows if they see them again. So
episodic care, yeah. Ours is continuous care, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we always like to wrap up these podcast episodes with a little career discussion, career advice, and I'd love to hear, what would you say is maybe the best piece of advice that you've been given in your career?
Well, a lot of people have given me a lot of advice, so I stand on the shoulders of oh so many leaders. I think one that stays with me though is that in healthcare, in technology, you have to stay at the edge of discomfort, because you have to keep learning and you have to keep bringing that in, and know that you can only bring it into your ecosystem when it's ready. So we hear a lot of jazz and all of this technology, but staying at that edge of discomfort, trying to continuously figure out what will make sense, what will not make sense, for healthcare tech, that's different and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating way to describe it, living on the edge of discomfort. And I think a lot of CIOs struggle with the balance between the operational minutia of what's required and the innovation side, which I would describe as living on the edge of discomfort. How do you balance those two?
The truth is, it's a false choice to pick between the two, right? You have to do both. Your operational needs are the running of your org, availability, uptime, accuracy, fidelity. Those are things that have to happen. But you have to figure out how you develop enough of a routine and discipline so you have mind share available to look at emerging tech, emerging ideas, emerging operating models. That is an absolute necessity, and it's an art, not a science. Some weeks are more focused on operations than in innovation, but the truth is that you have to do both. And my background is both in product management and innovation, as well as straight out engineering. So being able to balance that definitely helps.
Guess that's what makes a good leader, balancing the two.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Madhu, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us and share about all you're doing at DaVita. It sounds like you're working on some really interesting AI efforts and really putting the patient at the center of the care. So I appreciate you taking time to talk with us. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for the CIO podcast by Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast applications. Thanks, Madhu.
Thank you, John.